Ever seen a driver blowing the bag? Getting to be a far more familiar sight than it used to be. Over 2,000 drivers are breathalyzed every week.
Look at this chap. Had a marvelous time. Didn't think for 1 second about my fit to drive.
Then he makes a stupid mistake.
Didn't think he'd ever be stopped. You have to blame. We didn't consider himself a criminal. We'd only had a couple of drinks. But he'll lose his license. And unfortunately, his wife can't drive.
But he was one of the lucky ones. Last December, a quarter of all the drivers killed were known to be over the limit. Last year, there were nearly 40,000 convictions. Make sure you're not added to this list. Drinking and driving. It's just not worth it.
Most of us reckon we can handle our motors after a few pints. Take it easy and you don't attract along. But what if some stupid git does this? Or this? Or this? Those few pints just cost you your license. So is the stupid git now. Forget the car when you go for a drink, and you can also forget the well-meant advice. Forget the self-denial.
Thanks, mate. I'm driving.
You can even forget being a free taxi service. But most important, you can forget this. So if you really want to enjoy it, remember, when you fancy a drive, forget the car.
Before you say you'll never get hurt. Well, every single day, hundreds of people say it can't happen to you, but it does. And the difference between an ugly smash-up and just a nasty shake-up could be simply the seatbelt habit. So before any of us say it can't happen to you, snap into that seatbelt habit. You know it makes sense.
If you imagine this is your car, then this is a motorcycle. Now when you drive up to a main road, it's easy to see other cars, but because a motorcycle is a third of the width of a car, he's very hard to see, but he's dead easy to hurt. Nasty. And that's why at junctions I'm asking you to give a second thought for bikes. Stop. Think once for cars, hold it, then think again for bikes. If you want to avoid this, think once, think twice, think bike.
Diamonds are for danger. The diamond sign means a dangerous load. Look out for the diamond sign. They all mean danger. If there's an accident, when you see the diamond sign, keep away. Go to the nearest phone and dial 999. There might be an explosion or fumes that could kill you. Diamonds are for
This is my dad. That's my sister. This is my mum. And my nan. She always waits there. She worries when we're not all home. Mum and Dad worry when I am. Mind you don't burn yourself. Dry yourself properly. You'll ruin your eyes. And every Saturday morning when me and Mum go shopping, my nan always tells me to look out for the traffic. Me! It's Mum she should be telling. When she wants to get to the shop opposite, she just takes off. She doesn't bother with the crossing. We've been told at school not to go between parked cars, but to use the crossings. And my mum says that's quite right when you're young. At home there's all that sit up and eat up, otherwise you won't grow up to be big and strong and healthy. And outside, where there are cars and lorries and buses wagging past, my mum should be wearing L-plates crossing the road. Good job she doesn't drive. My dad does, and he's very careful, but he doesn't always practice what he preaches. Me and him had been up in the park Sunday morning. Then he remembered he hadn't bought a car. Dad started walking to the subway, and he tells me to make us late for our dinner. It's very funny how grown-ups can always be right, even when they're wrong. Now, if anybody had tried that when he'd been driving, he'd have done his nuts. The best though was when I was with Mum. Me and her were on our way home after getting in more shoes. Anyway, we had to cross the road, and she didn't even see the car coming. She was about to tell the driver what she thought about him, and he was out the car to do the same. And you know who he was? My dad! In our new car. We could have all finished up as mincemeat. And you tell me how they would have explained that to my nan.
Not so long ago, people with traffic problems usually found a quick answer. But today's drivers need to keep a cooler head. Do you leave enough space when following other vehicles? And if another car fills the gap, do you drop back? If you don't, this sort of thing can happen. Remember, keep your distance.
As if I haven't got enough to do. All these blooming bills to pay with. Like getting to the trip called Charlie around these corridors.
You want old Jim, then, Ada? Hang a bit. I've got one here, haven't I? There you go.
Oh, Timmy, you are a good boy. That's better.
Hanging on about them flat doors again. They'll leave them open all the time. Stupid, isn't it? You come in here.
If there should be a fire where you work, the quickest way to make it spread is to wedge open a fire door. Fire doors prevent fire spreading, and they're a barrier against suffocating fumes and smoke, giving you enough time to escape to safety. Never wedge open a fire door, never lock them shut. Fire doors can save lives. Yours may do.
You know, each of those cars carries a whole family. Yes, even him. He's probably got a wife and kids, depending on his arriving home safely. What are his chances? That much less if he doesn't snap into his seatbelt. There can be some pretty frightening results from accidents where people don't wear their seatbelts, and they don't have to be fatal. After all, what's a family with mum or dad laid up in hospital? I know that if you wear a seatbelt, you reduce your chances of being killed or seriously injured by half. So what I'm getting at is this. If you won't belt up for yourself, then please do it for them. Because your seatbelt is their security. And I'm going to be around for quite a while punching that message across. Right, here's my first problem. The driver who takes all the trouble popping round the corner, because it's that popping round the corner drive that's the most dangerous, just when you think it's not worth belting up. Think about this one. Over 60% of all traffic accidents happen in built-up areas. So let's get into that seatbelt habit. And let's make it automatic as closing the car door. After all, you wouldn't drive off without hearing this, would you? The clank of the car door closing. Right, let's add another sound. The click of the seatbelt being fastened. Clunk, click. That makes sound sense, doesn't it? Never clunk without you click. You know, we could become a nation of clunk clickers. Is it all worth it? Well, if it's not for you, surely it is for them. Remember, this seatbelt is their security. See you, clunk clicker.
Marble Arch in London is a good place to begin a set of journeys. Journeys whose purpose is first to show the astonishing variety of landscape, townscape there is in Britain, more than any other country in the small areas I know. And second, to try and guess at what we're doing to it, whether what we do on the landscape is going to enhance the variety or diminish it. But Marble Arch especially, for my first journey, was a simple line, a direct line between London and Manchester. It isn't the same as hammering up the M1. It's a very different story, in fact. It only goes through one big town. In between, there are marvellous passages of tranquility and a marvellous variety of landscape and village. And the road to Manchester started for 2,000 years just over there. The Edgware Road, the Roman Watling Street. And now as then, simply points like an arrow to the Midlands to the north. Going up the Edgware Road is a good place to check what we're doing to the townscape. The Marble Arch's improvement here, it's a sad diminishing, because it's always been a funny, quirky, rough and tumble place. Not quite in the West End. You never know what you're going to meet quite next. When I first came to London, the Edgware Road actually looked like that. The buildings were up and down Victorian, some sleazy, some posh. Now, they've all been replaced. And while the character of the Edgware Road and the people is still there, it's still the funny old picture it always was, the buildings have become smooth, platitudinous. Running down the hill now to Cricklewood, one of the long, straight suburban high streets on this way out of London. It works pretty well. The buildings are undistinguished enough, but they planted trees when all this went up in the 1880s and 90s. Now you can see a sense of identity here. That's what this is basically all about. That straight line from London to Manchester has now taken us beyond the rather tatty edges of London, out into the real countryside. This was the first big landscape change, the chalk ridge. So you can't see much here, it's closed. Actually, a lot of this was planted Festival of Britain time, so there's another improvement. This thick planting, suddenly, right at the top of the ridge, gives way to openness, open downland. You're on the roof of the world. Sensible Down, over there at the bottom, one of the most famous gliding clubs in Britain. The gliders use the scarp of the chalk to get lift. They do it at Sutton Bank, Yorkshire, Great Hunter and the Peak. Some people think that the gliders shouldn't be there as an intrusion. That I really can't see. Because provided the buildings are kept modest, the gliders themselves add to the landscape. They're in a partnership, man and the air and the hills, are getting their sustenance from the hills in a very real sense. Here there's just more intrusion from the parked cars as people come to look at the gliders than there is from the gliders themselves. never done any gliding, but everyone who has seems to think it's marvellous fun. Down the road there, at the bottom of the hill, the edge of Dunstable town, is a modern building where the designer has had quite considerable fun. When I first saw it, I thought this was a church with two great rocking roofs. Not, it's a pub. And although inside, it's not as dramatic because you can't see right up into the timber work in there. They certainly had an enormous amount of fun outside. There could be far more buildings like this. We sometimes go in for odd shapes. But dead serious about them, like some of the new university buildings. This is just having a laugh and listening through. Especially in things like new shopping streets. One building like this would revitalise the whole thing. It could indeed revitalise the one rather limp in the middle of Dunstable itself, because there the focal point is just a bit of abstract sculpture. It would have been so much better if something like this had been the focal point. And across there, there's an exceptionally nice public park. No railings, no notices, just a broad wedge of grass way up between the trees, and then off into rough ground at the beginning of the downs. Now that public space is really meant to be used. It's not just an area left on a map, you know, left over. They can't think what to do with it, which is what so many public open spaces are. This is necessary, just as the gliders using the lifts from the downs is necessary. How not to go from London to Manchester, at least for me. The straight line route is intersected by the M1 at a couple of places this end of the journey. Here, it's the service area near Port Tagnell. These cafes taken a bit of stick, but although they're not marvellous buildings themselves, the fact that there's a bridge over standing on from one side to the other means that the basic act of tying this structures into the environment has been done. If they'd made a tunnel instead, you would have just had two isolated things either side. Here, made a tiny knot in the landscape. This is the basic thing, far more than the quality of building. As I said, it is not my way of going from London to Manchester. These next few miles here are exactly in the straight line. And just this once, I'm going to make a motorway journey. But believe you me, I'd rather go from Newport Tagnell to the next town by the quiet and winding A50 any day. Well, there at last is my turn-off. It's only about 10 or 11 miles, but it's felt much more. From here on in, it's about another 5 miles to the place I said was the only big town the whole way on this direct line between London and Manchester. Northampton Market Square. A very surprising place to find in what is otherwise a rather drab South Midlands town. Northampton had a fire about 1680. It meant the whole town centre had to be rebuilt. New church, public buildings, and also new market square. And the way they rebuilt it makes the place really humming. A few of the old buildings are left. The whole rhythm is still left. A rhythm of very narrow frontages, lots of detail, the buildings coming out fighting. The way everything is packed in, especially on a day like today where the market is full swing, makes it look more like Belgium than any other town I know in England. And of course it's got trouble. It's going to expand from 120,000 to about 200,000. That means a much bigger town centre. And as part of that, the whole of the north side here is due to be replaced by a monolithic frontage with an office block behind. In the centre of that is the Emporium Arcade, built 1901. And in spite of its size, it has the same quality as the rest of the earlier, smaller buildings around the market square. Full of detail. Things are always happening on the facade. The balconies, gables and chimneys going up to the top. You might call it debased, worrying about architectural styles or why people want to, I just don't know. But for all that, it's a good neighbour here. It's a bit difficult to talk about the arcade at the moment, because by the time the programme goes out, fate will probably be decided. So if this turns out to be an obituary, I'm very sorry. At the moment, there's one hell of a fight going on between petitions, 10,000 people have signed to try and save this, which is quite something in a town of maybe 120,000, and a town with a sort of fairly phlegmatic reputation. The trouble with it originally was it was meant to go through the end there, and they couldn't get the building next door, so it became a kind of blind arcade, which is one of the worst things an arcade to be. Yet, in the last 10 years, it's begun to regenerate itself naturally. And meanwhile, here's the reasons given by the council for demolishing it, reported in the local paper. First, the success of the new scheme depends on running a service road at roof level through this place. Well, my answer to that is change the scheme. So what's more important, the fate of a living bit of Northampton or just one scheme, the details of it? Number two, the hodgepodge of small shops, many of them rather on the seedy side, is an illogical use in a modern town centre. That seems to me to be nonsense. It's exactly what a town centre is about. Number three, the arcade was bought by the council for demolition and not as an investment. But what a confession of failure. You just buy up parts of the town to demolish them and don't alter your opinion, even in the face of regeneration already happening. And number four, the arcade has no real architectural value. No architectural value with this great cupola here and the balconies and the arches down there. Arches with a perspective effect because this arcade is on quite a considerable hill. And that, in my experience, which with respect is probably rather larger than that of Northampton Council, is architecturally unique. If they really do pull this place down, it'll be a diabolical shame. I said the Leicestershire village is pretty drab, and this one certainly is. Stony Stanton, about the centre of England, also about halfway between London and Manchester. A dead centre, you might think, looking at the bits of it. Although it's fairly prosperous, it gives a feeling of having laid down and died. Verges just left with concrete posts, chicken wire, no attempt to make anything of them. Fragments of old walls broken down. Still a working farm, that's about the happiest thing in this village. And in spite of all that, I did say there was one thing here which could make this place one of the most exciting villages in England. And it's this. Right in the middle of the village, the abandoned quarry, the lake at the bottom, the houses all around it. Very hard, very old rock. There wasn't much use for building stone. It was used for rubble. It was more used as road metal. Now the quarry's worked out. One side is the municipal rubbish tip. All round the end, people seem to be chipping in with their own bits of rubbish. What a waste. I think what could happen, we've got a ramp there now. You can get down and use the lake part for small-scale boating. You could have houses all round, looking in, taking advantage of the view, instead of shunning it and tearing off somewhere else. It makes you feel this is too big for the people. They daren't look at it. It would worry them too much. You know, when you think of what Finching Field has done with its little duck pond, just imagine what Stony Stanton could do.